I'm obviously the father of Jack Letts, the young Canadian-British man the media says is a violent jihadi. For 4 years, Jack and my wife Sally and I have been subjected to a media witch hunt. I've come to Ottawa today to stand before you, before my fellow Canadians, to say that I think our son is innocent and to answer any questions you may have about him or the charges that have been laid against us in the UK. My wife and I are not terrorists. We simply tried to save our son's life. We thought the British police genuinely wanted to help us when they said we could send Jack money so that he could escape from Syria. We were wrong. For 3 years, we've not been allowed to talk about our case or counter lies that have been printed about Jack because of contempt of court rules that apply in the UK. But if we don't speak out, Jack will continue to be described as a terrorist, and we think he'll die in a Kurdish prison. I want everyone here to know what we know, that Jack worked with others in the religious opposition to ISIS in Raqqa, that he condemned ISIS on social media, and that he wants to spend the rest of his life living peacefully and bearing witness against ISIS. But if I talk about this publicly in the UK, I'll be thrown in jail for contempt of court. In fact, there's a very good chance I'll be sent to prison again tomorrow when I fly back to England. Unfortunately, I don't have any other choice but to speak out because I love my son and I think he's innocent. I'm happy to go to jail to save his life. It's my duty. I'm his father. I've spent only 1 week in solitary confinement so far in a British jail for having tried to save Jack, but he spent over 18 months in prison in difficult conditions. Jack is not a violent jihadi. He was not a member of ISIS. The myth of Jihadi Jack was invented by a British journalist, and once the story broke, the police had to charge my wife and I for having tried to help him escape. The British government has now spent almost 6 million Canadian dollars trying to prosecute my wife and I. Jack is guilty, but not of being a terrorist. He's guilty of becoming a devout Muslim when he was a teenager and of going to Syria to help other Muslims. It's true that he chose to go to Syria, but not because he was a bloodthirsty terrorist. He felt he had a religious duty to help others who were suffering. He was naive and very religious, and it was clearly wrong of him to go to Syria. But once he was in ISIS territory, there was no escape, and anyone caught leaving was tortured and killed. This view of Jack, I know, clearly contrasts with the image the media and some politicians have created of our son. But if they have any evidence he's guilty of a crime, I challenge them to make it public and to pass it on to the police. And if he's guilty, I'll be the first to condemn him publicly. I'm a Canadian, and like all of you, I condemn violence and extremism. Like you, I believe in freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. I also believe in our Constitution and our Charter of Rights, which says that every Canadian has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, according to law, in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. We don't live in the Wild West, where people are lynched without trial, or medieval England, where witches were burned at the stake. We're Canadians, and we're better than this. I welcome Prime Minister Trudeau's recent statements on this issue during question time in the House, and particularly the statement he made in July last year, which says the measure of a society, a just society, is whether we stand up for people's rights when it's easy, for people's rights when it's easy or popular to do so. It's whether we recognize these rights when it's difficult, when it's unpopular. I'm not a father in denial. There are dangerous people in Kurdish prisons, and they should pay the price for their crimes. But I don't believe, as some British ministers, for example, have said, that everyone who went to Syria should be shot. We're better than ISIS. And we lose the battle for democracy if we behave like they do. All Canadians who went to Syria should be detained when they return. Anyone who's been involved in violence should be arrested, investigated, and punished to the full extent of the law. I think that devout young people like Jack, who have not been involved in violence, should be given the chance to help prevent other young Muslims from becoming extremists. My son has been detained for 18 months without charge, and his health is failing. For 14 months, the Canadian government told us they were working for his release. Both the Canadian and British governments have told us they will bring him home once he gets to a safe third country. And the Kurds are willing to hand him over to Canadian officials tomorrow. There isn't any fighting in Rojava, and Canadian diplomats and military, as Alex has stated, are clearly working in this area. Other countries, including the USA, have brought their citizens home, so why can't Canada do the same? I need your help to save my son's life. Jack should be speaking to you here today, explaining why he went to Syria, what he did when he was there, and why he's not a criminal. As someone much more eloquent than me once said, there's nothing that moves a loving father's soul quite like his child's cry. You are the reason why he exists on this earth, and you don't have the right to abandon him just because he's inconvenient or has trouble in school. I love my son. Please help me and the other families who have relatives detained in Syria to bring our children home. Thank you for listening.